My presentation is titled Rehabilitation, Regeneration, and Resilience. Key consideration for these 3 Rs in post-crisis recovery of heritage. Um, so we know that our heritage is really exposed to many disasters, whether they are resulting from natural hazards such as earthquake, as in this case in Nepal, where 2015 earthquake really damaged both movable and immovable, tangible and intangible heritage. Uh, and it is not just this case, but there are many such disasters, whether they are floods, fires, landslides, or other events that are related to natural hazards that have created a lot of damages to heritage. Well, it's not only natural hazards, but also armed conflicts around the world have been a source of damage to many heritage sites as well as museums. And here is just one example from Mosul in Iraq, which was very much affected. This was a very important historic city. And as you see on the left side, a very important minaret, which was damaged due to the conflict, the occupation that was there in this place until 2017. So we have many other examples where heritage has been destroyed because of disasters and conflicts. Now, let me move to the first part of my presentation, where I will highlight the key challenges that are confronting us with regards to post-crisis recovery of cultural heritage. Uh, the first question which puts out this challenge is which values and attributes are more significant for are more important to be retained or restored in the recovery process, and how do we decide that? Because of course there are many values and the attributes that contain those values which are affected when a heritage gets damaged. But then how do we prioritize, how we decide which one should be given more importance, and on what basis do we make that decision? Uh, for example, in this case, in Bohol, in Philippines, following 2013 earthquake, while there was, of course, damage to built heritage, as you can see the structure before the earthquake, and afterwards, you see that almost the whole structure is totally razed to ground. But then there were other elements such as these manuscripts, the bells, and other sacred objects, which were probably more important for the local community. Although for the experts from around the world, the focus was really on the built structure, but for the local community, these important objects that were really connected to their functions as a sacred space, as a place for worship, was important. But often that attention to what is of value to the local people is not really given due consideration. Again, in the 2015 Nepal earthquake, while the entire country was focused at the national level or at the official level on these larger monuments, palaces, temples, or national museums, uh, there was not much focus on these little shrines, which were very much important for the local community to be restored, because for them, these were part of their day-to-day life. And for many of them who lost their dear ones, this was a place to really recover fast so that they can perform rituals and they can get together. But there was this understanding that the priority of heritage for the local people is very different than what the national symbol for recovery stands for in terms of heritage, is a huge concern. Again, these community structures, the ones that you see here, which is damaged very extensively, is actually a community building which brings all the community members together. But then the local people really were wanting to restore it very quickly, even before their own houses, because this is where they would get together, they would try to support each other. And that was the role that heritage would play in those crisis situations, which was officially not really recognized, and therefore there were not really enough support available to recover these heritage structures. uh, Now, let me again talk about another example from the same earthquake, where these traditional houses belonging to the local people were very much damaged, and they were all staying in temporary shelters. But when we went there after the earthquake, these people were really interested to save these windows. They were not so much concerned about rebuilding the houses or keeping those houses, the structure as they were left, extensively damaged. They were very happy to rebuild them, even making some changes. But they really wanted to bring back these wooden windows because they really are symbolizing their identity, but also their ancestors, where they come from, actually really is demonstrated through these designs of these windows. So when we were there to support heritage recovery, we found that local young volunteers were really willing to put all their effort and volunteer to really save these remains of the windows. So it's important for us to then understand that we should question how, on what basis we prioritize recovery based on a consensus reached by taking into account multiple perceptions and perspectives of values. It's not only the expert values that are important. We should really look at all those perspectives of values and then make sure that they're all recognized in deciding the prioritization and approach for recovery. The next question is, how does recovery process deal with new values that are related to painful memories following disasters and conflicts? Because when you have such crisis situations, there are very unhappy memories. And I just want to give you this example from Japan, where this disaster prevention building was damaged, as you can see, before the tsunami, and you can see the situation after the 2011 tsunami following Great East Japan earthquake. And then people from that place, although everything was wiped out and this structure was just a skeleton, they really wanted to keep this, and in fact turned it into a memorial where people would go and pray. So, because there was a memory attached to it, the mayor of the city actually lost her life calling for people to really get to the higher level when tsunami waves are coming. So, this powerful story really was resonating with the local people, and they really wanted to keep this structure, even though it is having some bad memory attached to it, as a symbol or as a sacred place, just to commemorate the effort of that person. While next to this settlement, there was another settlement where it was decided not to keep this ship that had floated inland and was actually in the middle of this settlement. So again, this could have been also retained like in the other case, but here the decision reached by all the stakeholders was that they would like to actually remove this ship, as they didn't want to really keep it. So it's very important that uh, it is we need to take into account the basis for making a decision on whether to retain or remove these painful memories, and then if we keep them, then how we should really keep them is a issue that we should always be thinking about. Another question, which is a huge challenge when we look at recovery of heritage, is about prioritizing a particular historic period as more authentic for reconstruction of heritage, because that is sometimes really a pressure that is there, to really keep one layer of historic period, while maybe using this recovery as an opportunity to remove the other layers. So it's important to also think about, uh, ideally we should include all the historical layers, but then if we have to really decide to keep one layer, then on what basis do we reach that decision? So this kind of discussion is often very challenging, as is this case in Korea, in Seoul, where this historic gate was damaged due to fire, and then when the recovery decision had to be taken, there was a lot of consultation on whether to bring that structure back to the situation it was in, or back to the design uh, as when the fire actually took place, or whether to go back and to a period where before the occupation, there was a Japanese occupation in the historical period, and there was a huge discussion whether we should get it back to a former situation, not the situation before the fire, but a historical period when the walls were when this was part of the city wall, as you can see in the historic picture from 1904. So the post-fire reconstruction actually did not rebuild the structure exactly as it was before the fire. Rather, it introduced some changes like adding the walls and some features which were more connected to the how it used to be before, in a more historical time period, because that was considered as a more important while the recovery decision was being taken up. So again, this is very, very difficult decision. Often politics really comes into it, but often for us as professionals, it is important that we have enough evidence of its historical layering, and really the importance of each layer has to be very much clearly communicated so that the decisions can be taken in a right manner. So then the other question I want to put forward in terms of the challenges is how to use post-crisis recovery as an opportunity to reduce vulnerability of cultural heritage to hazards beyond the ones that causes the crisis. So if the focus is on earthquake, then the recovery is always considering how to make the heritage structure resistant against the earthquakes, but forgetting that the same place is also vulnerable to flooding or fires. So often we forget that when you do the recovery, we should not only think about just the fire, as in this case in Bhutan, where this monastery was totally destroyed due to fire incident. And during the recovery operation, as you can see here, this it was not only used to just bring back and make of all the fire prevention measures in order to prevent the fire, but it was also used as an opportunity to introduce measures such as base isolation to make the structure earthquake resistant, and also to introduce improved evacuation routes and access for emergency services. These were not existing before, but then the recovery in the post-fire situation was used to also make it mitigate the risks due to earthquakes. So this is just an example to consider, like we have to not just be thinking about what hazard created the crisis, but really use recovery in a way to reduce vulnerability to all kinds of hazards to which the heritage is exposed in a particular place. The next question is, how do we take into consideration special challenges due to local socio-cultural context of crisis area for deciding the approach and process for recovery? So this is also something that is extremely difficult because when we go, especially as international experts or agencies who are there to support, in spite of all our good intentions, sometimes we don't know the real local context, and maybe we are not able to respond properly because of that. Again, I am coming back to this example from Nepal after the earthquake, where in this monastery, which was very sacred to the local community, especially for the whole people of Nepal, this is a very important monastery. It's very simple structure, but it's really important because of the religious value that is there because of the frescoes inside this structure. But then these frescoes were when we had to go there and do decide how to save those frescoes because the structure was very badly damaged. We recognized that actually it is very difficult for us to go inside ourselves. We had to actually get local people who are allowed from the, because they are from a particular community, they have the local permission to go inside, while the international experts or anybody from outside cannot go because of the sacredness of the place. and the local rules that are there. Again, you have to address the situations, because if you are there to go and support, probably you have to train people who will be able to go inside to do the salvage and to do all the operations that are necessary. There's another thing that I want to highlight, which just makes, again, another point about the importance of considering local context. While the paintings were removed, as you can see here, some of those wall paintings are outside now, but the local committee then didn't want to reuse them back, because according to them, they had lost their sacredness, so they can no longer be. So for them, the values are not in the material of these wall paintings, but the values lie in the sacredness, in the process of doing these paintings. So and of course, there were also artists who knew how to make those paintings. So even if they were not exactly the same as they were before, they preferred that the recovery should actually involve the repainting, of those walls after the structure is rebuilt by the craftsmen, local craftsmen. So again, highlighting that recovery can be done in a very different way, based on how the local culture really looks at that heritage, and which values it really recognizes as more important. Again, Japan is an excellent example, where many of these structures are not just important because of their material authenticity in terms of their historic, the age value, but they are important as a cyclic way of rebuilding these structures every 12 years. So this process of cyclic renewal is part of their heritage value. And again, for them, it's more important that this ritual or this process of rebuilding after every 12 years is what is giving the value, and doing it in the right way, following the right workmanship. The process is more important than the physical materiality of the structure. So again, emphasizing that reconstruction or recovery is very contextual, and we have to understand that. So let me now move to the three R's that I talked about in my title, because each one of them are important for achieving sustainable post-crisis recovery of heritage. And I'm going to go through each one of them one by one, starting with rehabilitation, and then show you some examples to illustrate what do I mean by each of these three R's. And that way we will try to really understand what makes post-crisis recovery sustainable. So let's start with rehabilitation. I will come to the definition after the examples, but let me first talk about some examples on how does rehabilitation really contributes towards a sustainable recovery process. Now, in this case, again, in Nepal, after the 2015 earthquake, you can see this important temple was totally destroyed, and you can see the picture before and after in one of the historic villages in Kathmandu Valley. Now, yes, it is very important that this structure is built, because this is of extremely important value. It has an architectural value as well, historic value, and of course, it is a religious structure. But then, what does rehabilitation mean in this case? Is it only meaning that the structure is built back as it was before, or it is also to make sure that there is a continuation of social and religious practices that are associated with traditional spaces? So if you look at that temple, it's not just the structure but the space around it, where a lot of social and religious practices are carried out by the local community. You can see here they are drying the drains, they do washing, they do lots of things, and in fact they spend a lot of their time in these open spaces. So when we are talking about recovery, if the focus is always on the structure and forgetting that continuation of these functions are more important, especially in the open spaces, and maybe our recovery is not going to be sustainable. Again, in the same earthquake, post-earthquake situation, what does rehabilitation in this case mean? It means that this festival, which was unfortunately stopped, abruptly due to the earthquake, and the structure, that this chariot that was taken around was just left for the local people, even if their houses were not rebuilt. Even if they were staying in shelters, they had lots of problems of daily survival. They wanted the revival of this procession, of this cultural practice. Again, I emphasize rehabilitation in terms of the functionality demonstrated by this ritual, And so they wanted to keep the spaces where they build the structure, that is carried around, and made sure that they started this, completed this chariot again, and they did this ritual or procession again, while nothing else was recovered at that time. So, recovering cultural heritage is about recovering cultural continuity through rehabilitation of community life. And here I want to give example from L'Aquila, a historic town in Italy, which was very badly damaged because of the earthquake. And then a lot of money was spent, as you can see here, in stabilizing these structures, because they wanted to retain all those historic buildings. But then a lot of money was put in and people moved out. There was no effort made to keep the community life, but it became just like a hospital for historic buildings. And therefore, even after decades after the earthquake, the community did not, all the community members didn't move back, because the effort was solely to stabilize the buildings, and then not thinking about how to revive the businesses in the city, how to revive the community function in the city. So it is not just about building back tangible heritage, but recovering the community life and functions attached to heritage is really important for the sustainable recovery. And I moved back to Japan, and just the same example that I shared with you earlier, of 2011 tsunami, followed by the earthquake, where this village, you can see here, is a fishing village before. This is how it used to look like before the tsunami. And after the tsunami, it was absolutely, you can see how it became like it was totally wiped out. And then again, here, the whole emphasis was on moving the community to safer locations. So you can see here the yellow areas are where the community was divided. The community was moved upwards, so that in the future they don't face any such tsunami action. And therefore, but the community structure was totally destroyed because they were distributed in these three different locations, and also not understanding that most people were into fishing, and therefore they needed to be near the coast. And also there were lots of rituals and processions which were very important for the community to stay together, especially because a lot of them, the majority population was elderly. There was also a demographic issue, that there were much more aged population, and therefore they really had huge psychological issues when they were moved. So providing them safety was not enough. You had to also look at how the intangible heritage, or the social structure of the community that carries out this intangible heritage. For example, these kind of development works that were done in this town, where the topography was totally changed, you can see that how the level has been raised, in order to make it safer against the next tsunami waves. But what happened as a result was the relationship of the land with the canal. You can see the canal here is totally broken. You can see the image on the above left side, which was a ritual carried out where they put the lamps in the river, in this canal, and therefore there was a very close connection of the people with this canal and the intangible heritage related to it. But if you see the image below, the same canal is now totally doesn't has lost its relationship, no, because the land has been raised again, demonstrating that sometimes altered link to landscape in the reconstruction process can really adversely affect the heritage or the identity of the place, and the local people really feel the loss if this is not considered, and only safety is the factor that is taken into account in the recovery decisions. So now I move to Mosul, and Mosul, as you know, is as I said earlier, is a very important historic town in Iraq, where Mesopotamian civilization, really, it was the center of that civilization of Assyrian culture. The Tigris River is very much around, is a important river around which the whole civilization evolved. But unfortunately, from 2014 to 17, it was occupied by ISIS, and then the war for and the conflict and all the liberation movement later on really damaged this city extensively. And you can see here the two landmark buildings which were damaged. One is the Al Nuri Mosque, and the other is a minaret. I showed you the image earlier, so you can see how badly this was affected due to the shelling that happened there. So during its occupation, the city went through this massive destruction. This is a church, which was also very important church that was damaged to an extent. And this was minaret that I had shown earlier, how it used to be, and it was damaged. And this is the mosque. And then there were lots of houses that were affected. You can see some of those damaged houses. But then, uh, through UNESCO's support, and I would say that that was an amazing initiative, which was called Reviving the Spirit of Mosul, the reconstruction of the two churches and the mosque and this minaret was initiated, and the whole project has been now successfully completed. At the technical level, I would say it has been a great achievement, with a lot of resources and contributions being made by the donors, but also with the huge expertise that was put in to make a decision in order to rebuild these structures. So you can see that uh, these churches and the you can see the before and after images of the minaret before. Now here you can see the church on the left side before, the Al Saha church, the afterwards, then Al Tahira, the left on the right side, and then you can see that it's all really being built back, reconstructed. So you here is the bird's eye view of the minaret of the mosque and then the city surrounding it. But then when you start to closely go around the city, and here I'm showing you the residential neighborhood of that church that was restored. I showed you the image here. You can see here on the right side. And then if I see the neighborhood of this, then this is the situation even now. And you can see there is no house that is being rebuilt. The community is not there anymore. Many of these houses, which are even standing, are not there because actually the minority Christian community which was living there has not moved back to this area. So, again, it is not only a question of not having enough finances, but it's also a question of the social aspects of because recovery of heritage is not just about buildings, it's also about the community coming back. Here you can see some more images of that neighborhood, where you can see these striking images where the community has absolutely been left. And there are also lots of these public spaces which are totally abandoned, not being used, simply because of the fact that a lot of community has been displaced and they are not there. So this is a paradox, right? On one hand, you have extensive amount of resources and technical expertise being put in place to rebuild the structures. On the other hand, you have the social aspects are not really addressed, or it's still not there. So can we achieve real recovery of heritage without having the social rehabilitation addressed? So again, the question that I had posed earlier, which heritage to prioritize, the monumental heritage, which is now being restored and reconstructed for visitors, or people's heritage, which is again, you can see here, people really associate themselves with the symbols, but for them, houses are really important, and their heritage may not be monumental. So, the questions that I would like to pose here is, how does one deal with heritage when the socio-spatial structure is altered following a conflict situation due to displacement, when new social groups have moved in while some original ones have moved out or have changed location? Can old identities be reinforced? Can new identities get recreated? Can existing identities go through transformation? So these are very, very difficult questions. But when we talk about heritage, I think these are important questions to really take into account and grapple with in order to decide where the priorities for recovery should go in terms of heritage. So I would say that recovery should promote cultural diversity, tolerance through consideration of heritage belonging to all sections of community. Like, of course, the primary religious structures are very important, but there might be other very minor structures, or maybe some communities which are in minority and their structures may be important to them, but it may not be really dominant for the entire city. So again, the question of really looking at not overlooking those marginalized sections of community is also really, really important when we do the recovery decisions. So heritage should be, and this is another powerful example of the rebuilding of the Mostar Bridge, as you know, following the Bosnian War. And again, it was done through UNESCO support. And again, it is demonstrates that how the reconstruction of bridge, in this case, which is a heritage, can enable building peace and consensus. Of course, the bridge was built as it used to be before, but again, new things were added in it in order to make it better perform for the future. But what is critical for me to point out here is that the bridge is not just a physical reconstruction of the structure, but it should also be seen as a proactive use of heritage for rehabilitating social fabric in all its diversity. So, how can heritage actually make a positive give a positive role to rehabilitate the social fabric of the city, which gets destroyed or damaged in a conflict situation? While moving from the social and religious diversity of the community, the other important dimension is the economic aspects of the community, because recovery is also about traditional occupations or traditional livelihoods. This is a blacksmith market in Mosul, and you can see how lively it was before the conflict happened. Now, while we can build all the structures, how do we bring back this economic function? How can we support these traditional craftsmen so that these bazaars where these crafts were being produced can be activated again? That kind of support is as important as putting in efforts towards the physical reconstruction. In Nepal, again, we see that recovery of livelihoods connected with heritage becomes very important. I mean, there are lots of livelihoods, for example, related to tourism or visitors who come to pray or worship. They are all connected to heritage. So it's not about the heritage itself, but also the livelihoods that are linked to heritage that need to be addressed. You can see here women selling flowers for those who come and pray in those temples that have been damaged. So when the temples get damaged, their livelihoods are affected. But here you can see a very striking image that even if the temples are damaged, they still are staying there and continuing with their livelihoods, of course, facing lots of challenges because maybe the effort is not really looking into supporting these traditional livelihoods which are associated with heritage as well. Again, in Syria, where the recovery is another issue, and as is an issue in many places, is that it's not just about recovering this bazaar, the souk, which was totally damaged, as you can see on the right side. But how do you can maybe get enough funding to rebuild that structure, but then you have to also bring back all the economy, the shops that are that can make that bazaar function as it used to be functional before the crisis happened. In Nepal, again, you see that the local craftsmen there they need to be really also involved because often the efforts are really made to give hire people from outside, while the traditional craftsmen who need to be more involved in the recovery operations are not really given enough the support. So again, how do you involve? In this case, actually, the craftsmen are being really involved in a very effective way, and their skills are being even upgraded using recovery as an opportunity. So here again, I can you see the how it is being used. Again, the same way recovery process is being used to build capacity of the traditional in terms of traditional knowledge and skills following the earthquake. And also, how to ensure economic rehabilitation through business continuity while transitioning from response to recovery. Like in this case, in Nepal, a temporary exhibition has been set up in order to make sure that economic opportunities are not totally lost while the recovery is going on. So, intermediate period, you have to think of these economic rehabilitation, and that leads me to this. Discussion on rehabilitation as what I mean through these examples in the context of post-crisis recovery of heritage is to refer to the process of restoring heritage places, not merely through physical reconstruction of damaged structures, but through the re-establishment of their social, cultural, and functional roles within the community. Rehabilitation seeks to ensure that heritage sites regain their living significance by revitalizing traditional uses, community activities, local economy, and livelihoods tied to them. It aims to rebuild both the tangible and the intangible dimensions of heritage, recognizing that meaning, identity, and continuity of the local community are as essential to recovery as the material fabric itself. Now I move to regeneration, another R, and I just want to show you this example from India, where after the 2001 earthquake, you can see that these houses that were provided for reconstruction of those traditional, because the traditional houses were lost, and nobody wanted to move in those houses because they were totally incompatible with the people's life, way of living. But then, after a certain period of time, when people were moving in, they started to change these houses. And you can see how people actually, through their own process of additions and alterations, they really made their houses look as it used to be before, incorporating the changes in those spaces that were provided to them. Another example where these kind of structures, which were also then very strange for their to their local way of living, were provided, and then people made such changes to them over time. And here you can see how they recreated the spaces according to their way of life. Some more examples here to show how cultural aspects need to be considered in the post-disaster reconstruction. So here we are not talking about heritage per se, but we are talking about the cultural dimensions that should be considered when we decide the recovery operations. So from people's creativity and adaptation, I move towards another example, which is following an industrial disaster in India, and you can see the chemical carbide, leak, which created this immense damage. But then here, people have actually used that, very extremely difficult situation to communicate the powerful narratives in a very creative way. To share their painful past, and in that process, they have done the healing or try to heal themselves. So again, creativity becomes really important in this case. Berlin Wall is another example, where as how it has been retained in some locations, but in other locations, a creative expression is being used to keep the memory, but also in a very, not in a very materialistic way, but in a more design oriented way, showing where the wall was, but in as a sculpture. So again, a creative way in which sometimes recovery can be used. Here in Bosnia, after in Mostar, after 29 years, you can still see the scars in some of those structures. But then you also see where community has really put in an effort to make their recovery not just the recovery of the structure, but really making it an important part of the community's life, introducing new aspects. Not just, for example, this is a mosque that has been rebuilt, But then we also find that this mosque is being used also, the area around it is now become a new area for community interaction. It was not there before. So in a way, there has been a regeneration of that area, using this to initiate new community activities, new ways of coming together, and also even doing some festivals, and these were not there before, but the recovery process has initiated these new things, which regenerate the place, addressing the needs of the ideas of the community. So therefore, I describe the second R, which is regeneration, which in the context of post-crisis recovery of heritage refers to a forward-looking transformative process that not only repairs damage or restores previous functions, but actively uses recovery as an opportunity to reimagine and reinvigorate a cultural meaning. It enables creative forms of expression, facilitates the communication of lived narratives and memories shaped by the crisis, and allows heritage to evolve in response to the newly emerging values, identities, aspirations, and needs of communities. So rather than reinstating heritage as it once existed, regeneration supports heritage as a dynamic living process, one that empowers people to reinterpret, reuse, and co create their environment in ways that fosters social cohesion, cultural continuity, and future oriented thinking. And now I move to the third R, resilience. And I just want to show you again an example where, in these cases where there was a 1995 earthquake, these traditional stone houses were abandoned by the local community. And the reason was because while they had very good stone craftsmen, they had lost their traditional knowledge. And also, the stone was being used in a very wrong way. And you can see how the facade is very nice, but at the back, the construction is really very poor. And lots of additions were being done. So, what happened was that the heritage itself, the vernacular heritage, had become very vulnerable because of the loss of traditional knowledge, and that increased. And they also, in the recovery process, the people who were brought in were not the local craftsmen, but they were coming from outside, and in many cases, because they were used to using a certain material, and the traditional knowledge was not there. So there was a mix of constructions. You can see somewhere they have used stone, somewhere they have used brick, and also the modern understanding of the RCC band or the concrete band, which makes the structures very strong, is not properly understood. Or on the right side, you can see they have added columns, thinking that they will make the structure strong, but not really understanding the real principles of making a resilient or a good construction, and thereby reinforcing vulnerabilities. In Nepal, after the earthquake, you can see that a lot of damages were because the constructions were very poor, not being maintained for a long time. Traditional maintenance practices were ignored. But then, when they decided to make a plan for recovery of these traditional houses, they only looked at the facade. How the facade could be made to look, as it used to be before. So, not just having a facade will reduce the vulnerability, right? So, if the next earthquake comes, maybe the structures will also again perform very poorly. So, just the design or the form is not enough. One has to also understand the entire constructions, and the challenge also for the not just the housing but other kind of heritages, that there's always this pressure between keeping the traditional knowledge and materials or using the new materials or knowledge. But there is always this tension. But one has to really make sure, actually, in this case, the structure was totally demolished, was because of the earthquake. You can see the before, and the picture before below shows after the demolition. And then there was this engineers asking for rebuilding this in new materials, without understanding that vulnerability was actually because the structure had changed the foundations in the past, and therefore it didn't perform very well. So again, understanding the reasons that create the vulnerability of the structure is very, very important to decide the right kind of interventions for recovery. So it's all about building back better, and that will involve us to think about human safety, of course, as the first consideration, but at the same time, balancing it with how best we can keep the heritage values. And therefore, recovery process should consider building back better by reducing physical, social, economic, and institutional vulnerabilities to these hazards while keeping the values in the best possible extent. So I'm coming towards the end to just um, talk about this issue of resilience, where I also want to say that heritage itself can become a source of resilience in some cases. Again, getting back to the same settlement in Japan, which was wiped out due to tsunami, as I showed earlier, the actually cultural heritage became a kind of a social anchor for the community-based recovery here. The people actually came together in this temple, even if they were displaced, and the local priest really helped them to really develop the solutions for the recovery following the disaster. So one has to also see how heritage plays a positive role, and that leads me to introduce the resilience, the concept of resilience, which is all about not bouncing backwards but bouncing forwards and balancing vulnerability reduction with heritage value protection. Because post crisis recovery is an opportunity to reduce risks from multiple hazards, as I mentioned earlier, too. So this is where I would say that recovery has to be seen also as an opportunity for reducing risks and building resilience. It also means that heritage should not be seen as a standalone sector, but it should be mainstreamed in other recovery sectors. For example, in case of urban environment or the cities, there are different sectors for recovery like shelter, planning, livelihood, infrastructure, and environment. And somehow we have to make sure that heritage is not standing alone only, but it is also reflected in each of these sectors. So this leads me to the third R, which is about uh, resilience, which in the post-crisis recovery of cultural heritage refers to the capacity of heritage sites, systems, and associated communities not only to withstand, protect, and restore cultural significance and values, but also to build back better by reducing the pre-existing physical, social, economic, and institutional vulnerabilities that contributed to risk before the crisis. It involves using recovery as an opportunity to strengthen governance, improve risk mitigation strategies, diversify livelihood mechanisms, and support community agency. Resilience also emphasizes the proactive role of heritage as an asset where traditional knowledge, craftsmanship, place based practices, and cultural continuity become key resources for adaptation, social cohesion, identity restoration, and long term risk reduction. So, I just took you through the three R's. And I just want to mention as a concluding remarks for my presentation that all that we have learned in Mosul and the other works that we have done in crisis situations through ICCROM and through other international organizations, we did this pioneering capacity building program for holistic, sustainable, and resilient recovery for urban heritage of Mosul that gave us a lot of lessons that I just shared with you through this presentation. And that has also led us to develop the program that Magda had mentioned earlier, which is called Post Crisis Recovery of Heritage, which we nickname as PCR. We did last course in Rome, and this year we just finished a course last week in Asti, in northern Italy, and we hope to continue this course in the future because there's a lot of need to build the capacities of our professionals to be able to do recovery of heritage in a sustainable manner. So I will conclude here, and thank you very much, and I'm happy to take any questions. Sorry, I extended a little bit of my lecture, but I hope not too long. So I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you very much.